What is cloud computing? Before we talk about cloud computing, let us see how was life before existence of cloud. Before cloud, we used to have something called on-prem infrastructure or on-premise infrastructure, meaning that organizations used to manage the servers on their own. And these are the servers where development, testing, and operations team would be using for their day-to-day activities. And this is where they would host the customer-facing application as well. Now, there are a lot of disadvantages in having on-premise infrastructure. Let's talk about a few of them. First of all, it's not easy to scale up or scale down. For example, let's say that you're running a service like Netflix, where you're providing video streaming services for your customers. Now, you cannot expect the traffic to look something like this. It's going to look something like this. You're going to see bumps in traffic, especially when you run offers. Your customers are more likely to enroll and start using the streaming services. And when these happen, you're going to need additional resources. And by resources, I mean primarily RAM, CPU, and hard disk to support this traffic. So when you have an on-premise infrastructure, you have to anticipate that load and procure the servers beforehand. The problem with this is you might end up over-procuring the servers or under-procuring the servers. And what's even worse is that you're not going to need so many servers all throughout the year. You might run offers once or twice a year, and only then do you need all these additional resources. So it's unnecessary investment to invest in so many servers when you're not going to need them all throughout the year. Another disadvantage is that obviously you have to hire people to maintain those servers for you. And this comes along with additional expenses like their insurance. You have to pay to the real estate that is being used by that individual, etc. You also need to pay the rent for the real estate that you're using for your infrastructure. When I started using cloud and when I looked at the monthly bill, I almost laughed at it because the expense was so much that it is on par with procuring new servers. But then I realized that it's not just about the expense on the servers. You also need to consider the expenses to keep that server and maintain it. So considering all that, it actually gets really expensive. There is greater risk of data loss and downtime. In all likelihood, if you're having on-premise infrastructure, it might be residing only in one particular region. And if something happens in that region, maybe an earthquake or fire accident, although I wish it doesn't happen, then all your servers would go for a toss, which means there's going to be downtime in your application, which might impact your customer experience and eventually your revenue. It's really expensive to procure and maintain new servers, and it's also time consuming to allocate resources for the new team members. For example, let's say that you have developed something and then testing team wants to test it. It's really time consuming to allocate resources for the testing team for them to test your application. You have to take care of servers, you have to install the operating system and all the supporting softwares in order to start testing, which might delay things. As an organization, you're supposed to stay focused on things that will distinguish you from your competitors. By that I mean staying focused on your customer requirements, writing quality code, or testing the application and making sure there are no bugs in it. And not things like spending time to choose the hardware vendor, or stacking up the servers, or making plans for disaster recovery. All these tasks doesn't really define your business function. They do not distinguish you from your competitors. They're going to take up a lot of time and eventually it will impact your business, which will leave a lot of scope for your competitors to stay ahead in the market. So how about somebody else will take care of all these tasks for you? And that's where cloud computing would come into picture. Essentially, some third-party company will have the infrastructure, and these are called cloud service providers or simply CSP. And then your organizations would use those services over the internet, typically by making REST API calls. Essentially, this is as good as you're having on-premise infrastructure, except the infrastructure is not managed by you, but is managed by third-party company who specialize in it. And AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud are some of the popular cloud service providers out there. So what are the advantages of taking services from a cloud service provider versus having an on-premise infrastructure? Number one, it's really easy to scale. You don't have to over-provision the resources in advance to account for future peak levels of traffic. Instead, you only provision the resources that you actually need. You can then scale the resources up or down based on your business needs in a matter of few minutes. You can also configure something called auto scaling, where you can tell AWS to scale the resources automatically when the resource utilization reaches a certain level. You would only pay for the resources that you use. You don't have to spend tons of money procuring the servers. Instead, you would only pay for the resources that were being used. If you're a startup, you're most likely to not risk so much of money procuring the servers. You would rather pay as you go for the resources that you use. You can literally get your application up and running with just a few dollars. And of course, you have to eventually pay more for the resources that you use. You can deploy your application in just few minutes because of the fact that you don't have to spend a ton of time in building the infrastructure. You can invest that time in more meaningful tasks like deploying your application and getting it up and running for your customers. Better backup and recovery. Cloud service providers typically have multiple regions. If one region were to go down for whatever reason, you have backup of your application in other regions. So your customers might not be experiencing downtime and thereby doesn't disturb your business continuity. You can go global in minutes. You can deploy your application in multiple physical locations with just a few clicks. So that way you'll be able to put the application in closer proximity to end users, which will reduce the latency and improves your user experience. So how do we describe cloud computing? Well, it is essentially on-demand delivery of IT resources over the internet with primary pay-as-you-go pricing, so that companies do not have to invest time, energy, and resources to maintain their own data centers. Instead, they can use services from companies like AWS who own and maintain data centers for you. If you like this video, you should also check out my other video which is on the same topic. Link to that video is in the description below. Make sure you watch it. I've also kept some useful resources on this topic. Again, you're going to find them all in the description below. But before you leave, do like and subscribe. The current subscriber count of this channel is embarrassingly low, and this channel is really struggling to take off despite putting a lot of effort to create good content. It only takes a couple of seconds for you to like and subscribe. I don't really expect you to share this video because I understand it's a difficult task to do, but if you do it as well, it helps this channel and keeps us motivated to bring you more quality content like this. I'll see you in my next video. Have a great day ahead.